Hello everyone, in today's video I'm gonna show you how to get the Author Time Champion Medal and maybe even World Record on the Summer 2023 track 02. We're gonna go through in-depth analysis of the current World Records replay. I'm gonna go through some explanations on why does he do in a specific ways, or maybe you'll be able to also pick up some things that you can use to improve on your game as a player overall. So we're gonna go through the world record replay. So the world record on this track at the moment is held by Kebby, who is a Swedish player, actually one of the best casual players in Trackmania. Most of the time when you see like these people who are the top of campaigns, usually they just play or hunt maps. They usually never really engage in competitive play. So most of the time these players just develop a very time attacky based skill sets. Usually consistency for them is quite lacking. But usually they just play things for fun or hunt things for fun, and usually they excel on things like campaign. And Kebby is definitely one of those players right there. He has seen a lot of potentially for some tournaments here and there, but usually his consistency is just nowhere near to what are the top players like. But either way, Kebby is one of the best players who knows how to maintain smooth steering, because this map is very, very heavy on the very start. So one of the main key parts of the white maps is usually there's one or two key tricks that you need to do a time successfully. As white maps usually are that short, it gives a lot of chance for a lot of attempts going. And usually the top times at the top are very, very highly concentrated. However, this map precisely is so heavy in the starts, and you need to get the start properly, and that will be the main thing that will allow you to elevate in your time, and especially to be so ahead of the author time even potentially as well. The whole map as itself is very simple. It's a very basic dirt track, very track of the day, at least some turns are, especially the ending parts. So it's nothing too crazy. However, as mentioned, the start is the most important part of this track. The main reason why start is so important is due to the momentum that you carry from the very first turn. It carries throughout the entirety of the track. And since this track is only around 20 or so seconds, it is so crucial to get this start correct, so you actually can get a proper time at the very, very end. So what does that mean? So as you see, we're gonna go through this input display. As you see, he does a bit of a partial steering right here. So even on keyboard, it's gonna be a bit tricky, but on keyboard, this is doable. Main thing that you want to do at the start is to do a nose slide. So a nose slide basically allows you to get grip on slidey surfaces. Slidey surfaces, I mean, is like plastic, grass, or dirt. Usually if you have enough speed and enough of steering, you'll kind of break out a slide and your skid marks are going to be separated. So you basically at that point you have lost your grip. No sliding allows you to maintain your grip on these specific surfaces, and it's a quite challenging thing to do, especially in the older days when you had very bumpy surfaces. But since in Trackmania 2020 most of the surfaces are relatively smooth, no sliding is a thing that appears quite often. So our start basically relies on getting a very solid no slide, and the rest of the momentum is basically practically kept through the track. If you can get the start properly, you're gonna get a solid time. How this will look like? So first, usually on the very, very first turn, if you're not a controller player or a keyboard, I highly recommend using the action key number 2 for the very start and steer to the left. So we all obviously want to reduce the travel distance so we don't touch the penalty sign and we keep on the regular or race dirt. He does a tiny wiggle. This is just to maintain the full grip while going on the downhill. If you jump very straight, you're gonna get a bit of airtime and it's just gonna completely cause a loss of momentum in this part. So you want to do a small wiggle right here. Actually, I would suggest to switch around here if you're a keyboard player. Around here to switch to action key number 6. And if you're a controller player, you can see that he already uses an action key to limit his steering. But very, very similar setup I actually suggest on keyboard as well. So you start the early steering with like action key 6. Action key number 3, which is 60% of steering, and fully steer it early on. So maybe the car tiny bit touches the sand, so it reduces the speed tiny bit. This is basically to put yourself on a line for a better exit right here, but not way too much, because if you touch way too much of the penalty sand, it's gonna just kill off most of your momentum. So a tiny bit loss here is actually better if you do keep the no slide going, only then. But in this part, there's additional challenge. Let's say in Trackmania, gears do matter. At this point, there's a gear change if you see happening right here. So the car jumps from gear 3 to gear 4. This might happen here, this might happen here, this might happen even here, based off how well you executed the start. So In this part, basically when the gear change happens, if you look at the inputs, what he does, he basically stops steering for the split second when the gear change happens. So in Trackmania, if you steer or if there's a skid mark, let's just say if you don't have 100% grip when a gear change happens, you will lose speed. That's the main thing to keep an eye out, and one of the main reasons why it's best to at least aim the car for this penalty sand. So it'll give you enough space, especially for this downhill, to maintain throughout the gear while having a decent momentum. Since basically the speed loss that you get from touching this penalty sand is way smaller than from getting the gear lost. So that is why it's one of the best things to do, and why it's best just to avoid the gear loss. Also, the gear loss just kills so much momentum compared to just touching the penalty sand for that bit. To summarize the very starts, taking an inside, usually I would suggest using Action Key 2 if you are on keyboard. Small wiggle right here. Early steering, it's Action Key number 6, as he does a very solid nose slide. But on keyboard, as I said, it's best to do that. Cancel the steering if when a gear change happens. You can very hear that by gears. When you hear it, oh, it's about to happen, you quickly snap back and it will switch to the next gear. Then you continue steering right here. Usually around this part, if you are on keyboard, as soon as you get after here, you can just jump to your regular 100% steering, and the rest of the map should be completely doable. So from here, the main thing is just to have a small skid mark gap. So mainly you want to keep the skid marks as close as possible, but at the same time, so the gap is not way too big, so you don't lose that much momentum as going through these parts. A lot of auto slides can be done. You don't really need to focus on speed slides or anything like that right here, mainly because the speed is not big enough. So you just want to keep your skid marks as close as possible. Do a bit of oversteer right here to get solid momentum here. This is a very interesting part, actually. So in this part, as you see, he does not do an air brake, but he does this weird bounce. So you want to take this specific line. What I would suggest, if you come from this part, from right here, you use the, if you play on camera 1 that is, you use the checkpoint right here as a bit of a guideline. And then when you see this part, aim for this part right here. But do not air brake. Reason why you don't want to air brake is because there's a very high chance you're gonna land around the penalty sand. And if you just bounce through the penalty sands, basically if you don't have that much grip on penalty sand, you're not gonna lose that much speed. So it's best just to use the counter steer, be as straight as possible at this part, steer a bit to the left to basically suppress the bounce effects at landing. And then you keep skid marks as close as possible and forward to the next parts. And just try to keep the as inside as a line possible, at the same time keeping skid marks here. Here, main thing you can aim for it's actually this very nice setup right here. So there's a penalty sand right here, so you just want to aim for that. So you have the straightest line possible. Steer immediately from the center point right here. Oh, here that's a very, very close actually. And here full steer as much. You can kind of forget about the skid mark gaps for this part and just try to aim as much inside as possible. Around this part you want to straighten out the car, small air brake. Try to line yourself so the car lands up for a small ST. So let's say there's a 40% gap. Sorry, we're on dirt. So around like 60 or 70% gap between the front skid mark and the back wheel. So you get a small ST for the end, so you can maybe save like a couple thousands or at most. So as mentioned, to basically summarize, the start is very important. Action key number 2 at the very, very start. Small wiggle to keep the grip. Action key number 3 for the steer. You can touch tiny bit to the sand. Remember about the gear. Exit the action keys. Keep the grip on the downhill. Then go to the side. Keep skid marks as close as possible. Do a full steer. Aim for the checkpoints. Aim for it here for the corner. Try to be straight. Small tap steer to the left to reduce the bounce effect. Then go straight. Keep skid marks close. Full steer on the side. Look at the wheels right here to reduce the travel distance. Here a small zigzag to keep 100% grip on the downhill. Go over penalty sand right here for the setup points. Here early steer to the left, and here just look at this part right here and see what the wheel is doing and what is happening here. Just reduce travel distance, small air brake, and landing very close with the skid marks at the very end. And that should be O2. This, if you do all of these things, at least keep in mind, it will not only help you improve the perception of how lines work on, let's just say, a bit more straightforward dirt platform blocks, but also give a better awareness of how no sliding works, as well a bit of a gear management, at least on early no slides. And this should really help you put on a straight path on getting an either auto time, potentially even champion medal. And maybe if you do everything flawlessly, because this can still be improved, maybe potentially even for world records. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. If you have any other questions, make sure to ask in the comments below. Hope it gave you a better insight on how to do some of these maps. Hope it helped you also learn something about Trackmania and how the mechanics work. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you all for watching and see you later. Bye bye.